Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Translation: We have just begun the performance of this fruitive activity, a sacrificial fire, without certainty of its result due to the many imperfections in our action. Our bodies have become black from the smoke, but we are factually pleased by the nectar of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, Govinda, which you are distributing. The sacrificial fire kindled by the sages of Naimesharanya was certainly full of smoke and doubts because of so many flaws. The first flaw is that there is an acute scarcity of expert brahmanas able to carry out such performances successfully in this age of Kali. Any discrepancy in such sacrifices spoils the whole show, and the result is uncertain, like agricultural enterprises. The good result of tilling the paddy field depends on providential rain, and therefore the result is uncertain. Similarly, performance of any kind of sacrifice in this age of Kali is also uncertain. Unscrupulous, greedy brahmanas of the age of Kali induce the innocent public to such uncertain sacrificial shows without disclosing the scriptural injunction that in the age of Kali there is no fruitful sacrificial performance but the sacrifice of the congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord. Sutta Goswami was narrating the transcendental activities of the Lord before the congregation of sages, and they were factually perceiving the result of hearing these transcendental activities. One can feel this practically as one can feel the result of eating food. Spiritual realization acts in that way. The sages of Naimesharanya were practically sufferers from the smoke of a sacrificial fire and were doubtful about the result, but by hearing from a realized person like Sutta Goswami, they were fully satisfied. In the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, Vishnu tells Shiva that in the age of Kali, men full of anxieties of various kinds can vainly labor in fruitive activity and philosophical speculations, but when they are engaged in devotional service, the result is sure and certain, and there is no loss of energy. Something's left out? Vishnu tells Shiva that in the age of Kali, men full of anxieties of various kinds can... Just the references. In other words, nothing performed for spiritual realization or for material benefit can be successful without the devotional service to the Lord. In the word-for-word translation comes the compound word, actually, Dhuma Dhumra Manam. So Atma can mean body, mind, or soul. So the straightforward or obvious meaning of this is that the bodies of the sages at Naimesharanya who were performing a fire sacrifice had become blackened by smoke. But Srila Prabhupada gives the synonym of Dhumra Atmanam as tinged body, which is clearly understandable, tinged body and mind. Yeah. That not only were the bodies of the sages blackened by the smoke, but figuratively they felt as if their minds were also blackened. The smoke of a sacrificial fire is purifying. It seems as if the sages here are speaking almost blasphemously, that they are subtly denigrating the performance of sacrifice and saying, what result did we get from this? Well, we got our bodies black. And we feel that by doing this sacrifice, our minds have also become black. So the sacrifice is meant for purification. Of course, fire sacrifices can be performed for various purposes. We find that in the 10th canto of Bhagavatam it's described, for instance, that a fire sacrifice was performed for the sake of producing a demon who would attack the Yadu dynasty in Dwarka. The 6th canto also, Twashta, the Brahmana, performed a fire sacrifice from which was born the demon, or supposed to be demon, Vritrasura, who was born specifically for the purpose of killing Indra. There are many examples. During the Lanka battle, Indrajit left the battlefield for some time to perform sacrifices to increase his demoniac power for fighting with the forces of Lord Rama. So, well, even most fire sacrifices are not performed for the sake of purification. It seems, numerically speaking, that is so. in the modern age still many fire sacrifices are being performed. It's a lucrative means of income for those who brahmanas who are expert in performing them. They're mostly performed for they're all pretty much all performed for some material gain, maybe at a griha pravesh, or when people feel they have too many problems in their life. What often happens is someone goes to an astrologer who recommends that they have some sacrifices done to appease the various malignant planets who are attacking the person at that particular time. But the sages at Naimisharanya, they had a much more noble motive than those just mentioned. By performing a prolonged fire sacrifice, they wished to counteract the inherent problems of Kali Yuga. But they had not been performing it very long when they thought that, what's the use? That we're getting blackened here, but is there actually any benefit for anyone? The reasons for their doubting that, some of them have been enumerated in the purport here by Srila Prabhupada. One main reason is that to have the brahmanas, to find brahmanas who are capable of performing such sacrifices is extremely rare in Kali Yuga. What is that? Kaling Rakshasa Jayate Brahma Yonishu. What is it exactly? Jayate Brahma Yonishu. Exactly, I don't remember. Rakshasim Kalimashrit. Jayate Brahma Yonishu. In Kali Yuga, many demons taking advantage of the situation in Kali Yuga. Many Rakshasas, they're born or they enter the wombs, they're born from the wombs of Brahmanas. That doesn't mean that we should accuse everyone born in a Brahmin family of being a Rakshasa. But as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has pointed out in his treatise, Brahmana and Vaishnava, it's quite doubtful if anyone in the modern age is a true Vedic Brahmana anyway. We find throughout the Mahabharata, Ramayana, Puranas, throughout the Shruti and the Smriti, that generally someone born of a Brahmin family, a boy born of a Brahmin family, is considered to be a Brahmana. Or at least eligible to become a Brahmana. Because Janmana Jayate Shudra. By birth, everyone is a Shudra. And Samskara Bhavet Dvija. By the Upanayanam Samskar, one can be called a Dvija or a twice-born. So at that stage, a boy is considered actually a Brahmana. But according to Shastric understanding, they're still not really a Brahmana, they've just taken their second birth. Veda Parthet Bhavet Vipra. If they study the Vedas, they're known as a Vipra, or a learned person. And Brahmajanatiti Brahmana. When they actually know what is Brahma, then they're actually fit to be called a Brahman. But if we are more generous and say that a Brahmana is one who is born in a Brahmana family and undergoes the Upanayanam Samskar, they can be called a Brahmana. But actually to undergo the Upanayanam Samskar, there should be all other sanskars before that, beginning with Garbhadhana Sanskar. Quite likely most of the people born nowadays in Brahmana families, they never even heard of the Garbhadhana Sanskar. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and Shastra states that if in a Brahmana family there's a child or there's conception without Garbhadhana Sanskar, then the whole family is reduced to Shudra level. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, pointing this out, says that where are the Brahmanas? If there in all the generations, if there's ever been a discrepancy in the matter of Garbhadhana Sanskar, even if they did it but there was some discrepancy in performing it, then technically they should not be called Brahmanas. Nowadays they have the Upanayanam Samskar, which is supposed to be performed at the age of 8. They do it when the man gets married at the age of 80 or something like that. Usually, or more accurately, like 38. They quite often get married, usually after 30. But it's not really a sanskar at all. It's just a formal ritual. Sanskar means a process by which one's life becomes changed. The boy should, after taking this sanskar, he should study the Veda. So, the point is that it's very difficult to find real brahmanas in this. And unless there are properly qualified brahmanas, then you can't have proper sacrifices.
Yeah.
There's so many considerations to properly perform a sacrifice. The place has to be pure. For a major formal sacrifice, the land would have to be plowed with a gold plow. We find that description in the Ramayana, how the land would be plowed with a golden plow before undertaking a major sacrifice. It should be in a pure place. That means you can't perform any such sacrifice in Chennai or any other town or village. Any place where there is sinful activity that is unfit for performing a Vedic sacrifice. And the modern cities, towns and villages are full of sinful activity. What to speak of poultries and chicken shops and wine shops. Even if people sleep past sunrise, that's also sinful. So where's the question of being able to perform a sacrifice according to the Vedic injunctions? Of course, the situation had not declined so much at Naimisharanya when the sages who have spoken this verse were present there. But even slight discrepancies in the performance can render a sacrifice null and void. And in Kali Yuga, everything works against such ritualistic Vedic performances. So the sages were feeling we're on the wrong track here. It seems like we should be doing the right thing, but offering this sacrifice doesn't seem to be really what we should be doing. See, they're saying that the sacrifice, well, we're not so sure whether it's working out properly or not. We're performing the sacrifice to get a certain result. But the only result that we're sure of is that our bodies are getting black, which doesn't seem like, it's worth going through so much effort just to get your body black. Maybe the modern brahmanas could take a cue from this and make their bodies black, and then they could pose as SC or ST, and then they could get some government facilities, because brahmanas are discriminated against in the modern age. Because we have to be careful what we say, because you could be put in prison for making anything which sounds like a derogatory remark against... Anyway, better... Zip your mouth shut. So the Puranas were generally spoken in between the performance of the sacrifice. There would be the performance of the sacrifice, that's called the satra, when they're actually performing it, during the time of performance. And that would be performed by high-class brahmanas. Not even every brahmana can perform it. Only the certain class, high class of brahmanas, they can perform it. That's why we see certain brahmanas have the name, for instance, Vajpayi, which means they could perform that particular kind of... They're qualified to perform that particular kind of sacrifice. Some brahmanas are called... Their family name is Yagyak, which means they're qualified to perform sacrifices, where others are called Pujari because they're allowed to do puja, or some is called Purohit because they're allowed to do priestly functions like this. So, different kinds of brahmanas, Acharya, Upadhyay, all this. So to fill up time in between, they didn't play cricket, but they listened to the recitation of the Puranas, or Mahabharata. We see that Mahabharata, that was similarly recited during the breaks of the yagya of Maharaj Janamejaya. And a person who is suitable for reciting the Puranas, they're considered not on such a very high level. In the Puranas, they're not considered. By Vedic Brahmanas, the Puranas are considered not very high level. Brahmanas themselves, they recite the Shruti, Veda. And the Puranas are recited by the Pauranikas, the persons, they're not on such... persons who are not allowed to recite the Vedas, they may also recite the Puranas. So the Puranas are generally in forms of stories. There are various subjects of the Puranas. The Vangsha Anucharit is one, the description of the dynasties of great kings and the activities of great persons in those dynasties, and the descriptions of the creation of the universe. The Srimad Bhagavatam is described Atra Saga Visargascha Sthanam Poshanam Utaya Manvantareshanukata Nirodho Muktir Ashraya. 10 subjects of Bhagavatam. They're, the primary creation, the secondary creation of the universe. Poshanam, the nourishment of the universe. The various manus, the description of the various important persons of the universe, the destruction of the universe, liberation from the material world, and the ultimate shelter of everything. So the Puranas, they give various stories, and interjected among the various stories are moral instructions, religious instructions, which are supposed to help people who are not fit for hearing or reciting the Vedas, help to make them pious. There may be some little spiritual knowledge in there also. But generally, in the Puranas, we won't find the high level, at least the Brahmanas, the Vedic Brahmanas would consider like that. We don't find the high level philosophical or spiritual discussions that we find in the Upanishad. Of course, not that many Brahmanas are interested in the Upanishads. They're mostly interested in the Vedas, which are, at least superficially, Traigunya Vishaya Veda. They're concerned with the material world. So these Brahmanas, they were listening to the recitation of the Puranas, not in a disparaging or demeaning way, respectfully also. We find, if you see other Puranas, you'll find that Sutta Goswami is reciting so many of them, not just the Bhagavad Purana. So the Puranas, apart from being entertaining, they're not just like some fiction for entertainment, but they give so much information about the universe and how to live within it. All kinds of subjects are discussed. For instance, in the Garuda Purana, among the topics discussed are gemology, gems. Different gems and their characteristics and their benefits. The science of ghosts, although that wouldn't be considered a science according to modern science. Different kind of ghosts, what kind of bad things people have to do to become different kinds of ghosts, and what are their characteristics. And in different Puranas, as in the Bhagavad Purana, we'll find descriptions of various tracts of the universe, cosmic history, not just world history, but the great events of the universe, not only in this day of Brahma or even in this lifetime of Brahma. So very interesting, very informative, very educational, and Brahmanas would also hear this. They're not against the Puranas, but they just didn't consider it to be on the same high level as that of the Shruti. But after hearing so many Puranas about so many things, all kinds of universal knowledge, they're now in between the sittings of the yajna. They are now hearing about the nectarian glories of Govinda, and they're thinking, "This is really superb." Hearing the Puranas is supposed to fill up time between the sacrifices, but we're listening to the nectar about Govinda, and we're thinking we want to get the sacrifice finished so we can go back to hearing about Govinda. And hearing the glories of Govinda, we realize that this yajna is not that important anyway. Well-intentioned, but not very likely to give much of a good result. Whereas hearing about Govinda, well, that is guaranteed to give a good result. It's all auspicious. And even if there is some technical discrepancy in the narration of Govinda, that does not affect its beneficial. It's what would you say? It's beneficial effect. Because discussion of Govinda does not depend upon technicalities. One can even make serious technical mistakes in the discussion of Govinda, but that may not matter. Murko vadati Vishnaya, Pandita vadati Vishnave. Upaya, what is that? Now you see. Now I'm the Murka. I can't remember. Ubhaya tu samam phalam bhavagrahi janadana. So being a murkha, I couldn't remember the verse. I probably couldn't pronounce it properly, and maybe I got something wrong in there, but the explanation of the verse absolves me of any fault in that, if I'm living according to the verse. Translate that. So this verse states that a fool says Vishnaya. Just like we have the 12 names of Vishnu, that are the 12 names of the months and the 12 for the tilak markings. So we say Om Keshavaya Namaha, Om Narayanaya Namaha, Om Madhavaya Namaha, Om Govindaya Namaha, Om Vishnaya. Wait a minute, that's wrong. Seems like it should be Vishnaya. So maybe someone will say Vishnaya. But one who knows will say Vishnave. But they both get the same result. Because Janardana, Krishna, he accepts not exactly the technical wording, but he accepts the spirit or the feeling with which it is done or said. So that's the same for Harinama Sankirtan also. Harinam Sankirtan is the yagya for this age. No other yagya can be successful. Vishnu is satisfied by yagya. But one who is not of proper birth, there are so many conditions for performing yagya. Even the time should be favorable for doing so. But the whole of Kali Yuga is contaminated. So what's a suitable time for performing yagya? See, we calculate what is an auspicious time for doing this activity or that activity. But in Kali Yuga, everything is inauspicious. So when we say that it's an auspicious time for some material activity, like, I wonder if they calculate for opening slaughterhouses. Generally, you see, they do, right? So when they open, maybe they calculate the auspicious muhurta, and they bring brahmanas and everything. They do. See what rascals! These people open the slaughterhouses. They should be put in the slaughterhouse. For opening poultry farms, they should put those people in the poultry farm. Have their throats cut. Better. But actually, there's no auspicious time. There's nothing truly auspicious. Actually, even in any age, there's nothing auspicious in this material. So one time may be more auspicious than another. In other words, by doing it at this time, the result will be you'll only be kicked in the head 20 times instead of 200 times. So the really auspicious thing at any time, for all times, places and circumstances, is Vishnu Bhakti, especially in this Kali Yuga by Harinam Sankirtan, in which there is nakalaha. In reciting the holy name, there's no consideration of the time or any such. Nam namakari bahudanya jasarva shaktish tatrapitane amita smarane nakala. There's no consideration of so many particular technicalities or the particular time. Kayate shuite jata tota nama loy desha kala niyam nahi sarva siddhi hoy. In the chanting of the holy names, one can be even eating. You can't eat while you're performing the yajna. Even the brahmanas who are very fond of chewing pan, even they don't chew pan while they're doing the yajna. Only as soon as they stop and right up to the last second before they begin. But not while they're doing the yajna. But while eating, one is encouraged, you can say in between, Hare Krishna. So even while lying down, you can chant the holy names of Krishna. In any time, place or circumstance. There is a story about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is lokik, it's not pramanik. It means it's a popular story. It's not in any accepted treatise about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But it's well known and it's been circulating in Gauriya circles for 500 years or so. That one young boy, his name was Gopal, he saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu holding his tongue. So he asked, why are you holding your tongue? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, I guess he had to let hold of his tongue while he replied, although he can speak through his ears or his eyes or whatever, because he is Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vritti Manti. But anyway, he replied to the boy that I'm going to pass nature, so I shouldn't but naturally my tongue always chants the holy names, so to hold my tongue during that time, so I don't go on chanting while passing. But the boy said that you can never be contaminated in any state. By your chanting, the whole universe is delivered, so why don't you go chant? You can go on chanting in any circumstance. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very pleased to hear these transcendental truths being spoken by the young boy Gopal, and therefore he gave a new name to the boy, Gopal Guru, who became one of the great devotees in the Sampradaya of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, disciple of Vakreshwar Pandit and Guru of Dhyana Chandra. Anyway, the point is that the holy name, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught this, any circumstance, the holy name may be chanted. So all aspects of Krishna consciousness, they are not bound by rules and regulations. In the conditioned state, or in the stage of sadhana, we have to follow some rules and regulations. For chanting the holy names, there are some minimal rules. For deity worship, there are many rules. But in pure devotion, there are no rules. Pure devotion means the only two really important rules are always followed. Smartavya satatang Vishnur, Vismartavya najatu chit. To always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So we find, for instance, this Vangshidas Babaji Maharaj, he didn't have any beads, let alone chant a fixed number of rounds. He didn't even have any beads. The way he worshipped his deities, if you or I did that, we'd become lepers in hell for millions of births. But because he was treating them with pure love, Krishna is very pleased to accept that. Krishna Bhakti is always auspicious. Whereas ritualistic activities, their auspiciousness depends on to a large extent, on the technicalities of their performance. Is an important lesson we take from this book, from this verse. Hare Krishna. So any question about this? In Kali Yuga we give all what? We give all importance to the chanting of the holy name. We perform yagyas for initiation ceremonies. This has got to go down in one of the top 20 frequently asked questions. Okay. Okay, finish the question. Are they required? Other activities such as yagyas. What else did you say? Anyone like to answer? Ever thought about that? Why do we perform yagyas at deity installations, initiation ceremonies? Any offers? Anyone? What do you say? Shastra recommends Bhagavad Marga and Pancharatriki Marga. What's that got to do with the topic under discussion? Preaching and doing deity worship. I see. Okay. Alright, so, yeah. We're recommended to follow Bhagavata Marg and Pancharatrik Marg simultaneously. Jiva Goswami recommends that even though the holy name is the ultimate dispensation for this age, still deity worship should also be performed to help devotees to remain pure. So performance of yagyas can broadly be categorized within deity worship. Actually, there is no need for yagyas for deity installations. You can just do Harinam for everything, actually. But generally, a yagya is performed also according to Vaishnava rites, which also prominently include the chanting of the holy names. One major reason for that is in India, it's because people expect that, and they think unless there's a yagya, then the installation is not properly performed. And it's also to create an impression in the minds of people of the importance of the ceremony. I mean, the importance of the deity installation, the importance of initiation. That's why the yagyas, even though performed far from perfectly according to the standards. Usually the yagyas that are performed by ISKCON devotees are performed far from perfectly according to all the technicalities. They're also, we shouldn't think that they're just some sideshow, but they are auspicious also. They're acts of worship of Lord Vishnu. Theoretically, we could just sit and chant Hare Krishna and do nothing else. But we also hear about Krishna, instruct temples for Krishna, preach about Krishna, offer food to Krishna, visit holy places, and so on. Theoretically, none of these things are needed. Putting tilak on the body also. Theoretically, that may not be necessary. If you're always chanting the holy names, then what need is there of doing anything else? These are all standard activities which help to engage our mind and senses in Krishna consciousness. If we do all these things but we don't chant Hare Krishna, then we won't become Krishna conscious. It's unlikely we'll become Krishna conscious. Hare Krishna.